This is Mandatory Listening. I'm your host, Kent Mann. Each week, we sit down over a cup of coffee and discuss interesting topics in the world of the customer experience. On this episode of Mandatory Listening, we're going to talk about something a little different. We took Mann U to Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, and we spent some time with our friends at PrimaFit. So we're going to talk about some of the differences we saw in South Korea as well as in Indonesia. We're sitting this morning in the Mandatory Studios.
We're going to call this basement a studio now?
Yes.
I think we're getting into a bad habit.
We are getting into a habit of calling it what it is.
Yeah.
What listeners don't know won't hurt them, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm joined today by Dan and Hank.
Hey there.
Morning.
How you guys doing on your coffee?
Yeah, I dialed it back about a half a notch, so I'm feeling a little bit more normal.
From last week's episode?
Yep.
Yeah.
I finished mine a while ago, so I'm feeling pretty good.
So it's been a while since we got back from Indonesia.
Early December. It was kind of cool to go from freezing temperatures to the tropics. That was kind of one of the first, we're packing no coats, no long sleeve shirts, no light outerwear, just short sleeves and tropical wear, which was cool.
Yeah, we were right in the middle of the rainforest. Indonesia was hot and humid, and actually it was pretty refreshing. I wasn't unhappy about it.
No, not at all. And it was interesting going into the start of the rainy season too. So we got to see some very different rain than I'm used to.
Can we just talk about the flight? Do we want to talk about the flight?
This is going to be a podcast about how we complain about
air travel
and layovers. And so we'll give you a quick run through to our listeners about what it's like to fly from North Carolina to Indonesia. So we got on a flight from Asheville to Atlanta, took about 30 minutes airtime, and then we had a 12-hour layover.
And everything came to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we were on the first leg of our flight, 30 minutes in the air, and now we're spending most of our time laying around on airport seats. And then once that, I think it was it around midnight or?
Yeah.
We left Atlanta around midnight that night and then did a 15-hour flight from Atlanta to Seoul, South Korea. And that was fun.
It was not fun.
We were on the Airbus 350.
Yep, the new one.
The new, which was, the plane itself was awesome. It's just the 15 hours in that seat is never awesome.
Surprisingly exhausting to sit in a seat for 15 hours.
Yeah.
While you watch every single movie in the Delta Library and have 3 meals.
Exactly. And then once we got to Seoul, South Korea, which was a bit of culture shock, not as much as I thought it would be. It's a pretty westernized airport, so it looks pretty familiar. Besides, there's not a lot of Americans. And so then we had a 8-hour layover in Seoul, South Korea, which is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the number one airport, the nicest airport, the something they voted on in the world.
Yeah, it's getting every kind of award, and clearly when you see the airport, you can see why. It is lavish. It is easy to navigate. There's lots to do.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know what the award is, but it's clearly one of the great airports of the world.
They have little robots that will guide you to your gate or wherever you're looking for. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so after our 8-hour stint in Seoul, South Korea, where we got a hotel room in the airport, which was pretty fun.
I call it a cubicle. But if you want to call it a hotel room, sure.
It was a cubicle.
It had a bed. You could sleep in it.
Yeah. Hank was a little too big for the room. So then we got on the flight on Korean Air down to Jakarta, Indonesia, which took about another 7 hours.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So it's been a full day. We lost a day because of the time change. Mm-hmm. And now we're in a part of the world we've never been in before.
We crossed the international date line, and we crossed the tropics, the equator. So we left on a Friday morning. We got off the last flight on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
And our head was spinning from that experience.
Yeah.
I want to go back, though, and because one of the first things that I felt as an interesting topic was the difference in service between American Airlines and not the American Airlines company, but an airline company based in the United States, Delta, versus Korean Air in Korea, and just the stark differences between the two.
Well, the first thing I noticed is just the number of people that were working at the gate. I noticed with the Delta Airlines, it tended to be 2 or 3, whereas with the first Korean Air flight, I think there were 7 or 8 people working for a similarly sized plane.
Yep.
Yeah, they're putting 300 people on these flights with 2 gate agents, in Atlanta, which meant there was a bit of chaos. There was a lot of questions being asked. There was some confusion. And without question, it was anxiety producing. It was like a little unnerving.
And Atlanta is the busiest airport in the United States or world?
In the world.
Yeah. So Atlanta is the busiest airport in the world, and they have 2 gate agents trying to get a couple hundred people on this flight.
In contrast, the Korean Air flight with 7, I didn't felt like a lot more, but let's say 7 gate agents managing, there was never a moment in which you didn't know what you were supposed to do. You were any question you had or just even an eye contact was lavish, and your questions were answered, and the boarding process was actually seamless, I would say, for the same size number of flyers.
Yeah. So what's the lesson out of this?
Hire more people? Yeah, I think the lesson might be tied to the number of people it takes to create a comfortable experience in service. Yeah. Let's attach it to a restaurant. You got a restaurant with 20 tables, and you try to run those 20 tables with 1 server.
Yeah.
Or 2 servers.
Yeah.
The experience is going to be reduced. So, I mean, it's an easy takeaway, but that's one of the first things I think we saw about the service industry contrast between other cultures and the United States. We're trying to do this same level of great service with fewer people. We've talked about it before, and it was really obvious in the airline industry.
Yeah, definitely. So how about the flight itself, the difference between Delta and Korean Air in air?
Well, I'm a Delta fan, so I was pretty happy with the level of the seat quality, the entertainment quality, the food itself was plated and good, tasty stuff. So I thought we got a good experience. The difference was in our level of service. We didn't have a dedicated flight attendant, which was not terrible. It was kind of like a typical U.S. domestic first class flight, for example. In Korean Air, the difference was there were a lot more people, but it just seemed to be more frenzied. And I guess the communication breakdown meant we didn't have a real understanding of everything that was happening throughout. I don't know. What was your take on it?
It was cool that they had on the Korean Air flight to Jakarta, they had a announcement in Korean, then they had an announcement in Bahasa, which is the Indonesian language, and then they had an announcement in English. And so that was pretty cool. And I found that to be I think on the Delta flight to Seoul, they maybe had an announcement in Korean. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I think they definitely did on the way back, but I don't know that they did on the...
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I kind of think they did.
Yeah.
One little thing about the difference in the planes, I don't know. Do you remember what the plane was to Jakarta? Was it a 777 or
something like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty big.
But they had a camera in the nose of the plane and a camera in the tail of the plane, and you could go onto your screen and look at the front of you could watch the flight arriving and taking off, and the same with the tail camera, which I thought was interesting. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I'd never seen that before either. It was weird. We landed at night, didn't we, in Indonesia?
Yeah,
we did.
Yeah. So now that we've covered the flight there, we want to, before we segue into Indonesia itself, we wanted to give a quick shout out to Brian at PrimaFit, as well as his 2 sons, Mike and Ryan. They showed us a great time.
Brian Belt, who owns that business and has come to Man U here in the U.S., is a extravagant host.
Yeah, he was a rock star.
Really one of the best experiences I think we've had, no matter what country we're in, because he just seemed to have thought of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it would take me a while to list all the things that he was doing for us, but he was careful about creating a perfect experience for us as his guests.
For sure. So, Brian, if you're listening, we really appreciate that, and hopefully we give a good account of our experience.
Yeah, we would like to do that in return. So come back to Asheville. Let us try our best to match you, that same lavish experience at, say, Days Inn or a tent.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So when we got to the airport, it was nighttime, like we said. We don't need to go into too much detail getting into the city itself or to the taxi area, but it was pretty seamless.
Yeah.
Again, Brian had thought of everything. We had someone meeting us right there with our names and took us naturally through the airport, got us on our cab. And let's just talk about the traffic.
The traffic is insane.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Jakarta has 10 million people in it, which is the biggest city I've ever been in. And so you have to imagine that many cars driving on a road is pretty spectacular.
Well, and seemingly ignoring anything to do with lanes or traffic lights or rules. They just seem to know, oh, yeah, I'm going to go here now. Yeah, and everyone's going to accommodate me.
And most of them most of the cars on the road were mopeds.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So the vehicles on the road, I mean, there was a rule that we heard or that we learned about where on certain days of the week, you have to have an even or odd ending number of your license plate just to reduce congestion on the roads, which I thought was a pretty cool tactic. You know, in the United States, sometimes it's a traffic tax or a lane tax or a tolls or whatever it is. There's different ways of managing traffic, but I had never even heard of that one. And so it was a pretty cool little thing, especially with so many mopeds on road.
Let's get into. I thought that was interesting too, and just thinking about even with half the traffic off of the roads, it was still just crushing traffic.
I mean, there's a lot of states in the United States that don't have 10 million people in it.
Oh yeah.
Most.
Yeah.
But we got to our hotel, and then you guys volunteered, or were you volunteered to go to a 7 a.m. workout the following day?
It was pride, you know.
Yeah, we had to do it.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Because I slept in best I could, and you guys were gone by the time I got up.
Well, our hosts thought it would be a good idea to help deal with jet lag by doing a workout early in the morning, and Kent and I both agreed that would be smart.
Well, I think Brian had invited us to do a workout with Mike a couple weeks before we left. And I was like, oh, yeah, for sure. That'd be awesome. And then as we're approaching the day of us heading out, I'm realizing how long our flight is going to be. And then I'm remembering that I don't sleep well on flights. And so I'm going through this in my head, like, this is going to get ugly. I'm going to embarrass myself. But, I figured it would definitely be worth it to attack the jet lag head on. And so we got into the airport around like 10 p.m. or hotel around 10 p.m. and then woke up at around 5, I think, for like a 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. workout or something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
So we were quick turnaround. So we got into our host met us in the lobby, and we took a car to the workout facility, which was on the grounds of another hotel. And the workout itself was outside in this little cage. And so it was an outdoor workout when we were coming from winter weather to tropical weather. And so we got to really sweat off the jet lag, to say the least. And it was extremely humid. But it was a high intensity CrossFit style workout. So it really knocked us on our butts.
Yeah, it was great.
Hank, you're not a CrossFit kind of guy, are you?
No, I'm usually a cardio kind of person doing running and stuff. But it was a great workout. And as he said, it really kicked my butt.
I thought I'd be doing maybe a couple workouts that week, maybe, one or two or three, something like that. I ended up doing workouts, I think, every day except for one, because the best part about it was you finish the workout, you go up into the little recovery facility, and then they have the top cut off of a coconut, and you put a straw in it, and you just drink the coconut.
I worked out every day too. I worked out a way not to go to the gym.
Yeah.
So that brings us though to the nature of PrimaFit, the company that hosted us there, because that is their business.
Yeah.
They have these kinds of gyms and they sell workout equipment. And tell me a little bit about their company. What's the nature of PrimaFit?
Well, they have wholesale fitness equipment, and they have several different branches of their company that they sell different equipment to gyms or to lifestyle facilities or whatever. And they also have a personal training company, which I found to be pretty cool and right up our alley of delivering a customer experience and coaching and training. And so that was pretty cool and right up our alley. They also have the retail facilities in their malls, in the Indonesia malls, the malls were huge.
Yes, they were some of the nicest malls I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But why is that? Is it just...
They're like 5 stories, have every store you could possibly think of. And then we were only there during the week, but we heard on the weekends, it's like you can't even get in.
Yeah, the malls are destinations. People spend their time there because you can do everything that you need to do in a day in the mall. There's gyms in the mall, there's hotels, restaurants, and you really have no reason to leave.
Something Brian said, Brian likes riding. He's a cyclist, but can't really feel safe on a bike on those city streets. And as a result, cycling's been taken indoors. And so tons of workouts happen in a stationary bike inside just because of safety factors as well as air quality. And again, that leads naturally to some indoor gyms. And that's why PrimaFit's got such a powerful business.
Yeah.
So, but that brings me, though, to something else we experienced, which, because we're so focused on retail and the service experience, a real contrast in what we saw in Jakarta to maybe some of the retail experiences at the larger level, the big box level that we see in the United States. So what were your observations there?
Well, there was a focus on, even in restaurants, and really any job, whether it was security, whether it was the stores that we went into in the mall,
Hotel.
whether it was drivers, whatever the case was, there was a high degree of attentiveness to the job.
Yeah.
Way more so than what we see in the United States, typically big box. It seemed like even the lowest level job, it doesn't matter what you were doing, what your job description was, you took that very seriously. And I found that to be pretty profound.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've noticed here, people tend to think that they're better than a job. They think that a job is just a stepping point. And I noticed over there, it was more like, well, I'm doing a job. I need to do it very well and do my best, really.
Yeah, we were getting a lot of attention. There was, again, in all cases, there was a lot of service people provided. There was lots of employees involved in whatever the experience, whether it was restaurant or whether it was retail or whether it was, at the workout facilities where this was being done. It just seemed that there was a seriousness about the work, and it was taken like, this is important work I'm doing, which I thought clearly showed in the job. And I think it just inspired me to think about, on the U.S. side of things at least, how important it is that everyone working in our jobs understand the value of the role, the value of what they're providing, and the impact it has on the people you're offering that service to. It's missing sometimes. I'm not saying it's true everywhere, but when you see an employee so engaged and so proud of the work they're doing and so content with the work they're doing, the difference in the shopper's experience or the customer's experience is dramatically elevated. For us, that was one of the big takeaways.
Yeah. And I want to bring that back to PrimaFit in particular, because that was our first major experience with high-level employees that were doing serious work and working in that corporate environment, just corporate, Indonesia corporate. And my first thought are to Quendy and Patrick. So Quendy and Patrick, if you're listening to this, what's going on? And thanks for showing us a good time. They took their job so seriously. And not only that, they took getting better so seriously. It was a respect that you guys have something to teach me. Okay, I'm all in. I'm going to make sure everyone is on task, everyone in the room, everyone who's accountable to the result is going to take this seriously.
Quendy and Patrick have been in this business a combined number of 40, 50 years?
I mean, it was a long time.
Yeah. Ultimately, as professional as they were and as long as they've been in the business, they were right there on the front row. They were listening attentively. They were learning. They were very committed to learn. They were very committed to excellence. They were very committed to improvement. And I loved that. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, and that seemed to be not only the company culture, but the PrimaFit culture as well.
Yeah.
And because I don't remember exactly what their mission statement was, but it was around not only are we trying to get better at our jobs, but we're trying to make people that we work with and our clients and our gyms that we work with even better. And I found that to be a cultural wide thing in Indonesia.
Yeah.
And I think that's the crux of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and it was fun to live in that world with a business there with Brian and Brian's point of view and Brian's intensity. Brian was very committed to excellence, very committed to disciplined approach. I wouldn't call it military, Brian, but I would call it a real passion for excellence, a real passion for greatness. And I think Brian knows what it takes to get that. It permeates the culture at the manager level, we're working with the managers of his businesses, but it all made its way down then to all members of the team.
As well as our Australian friend, Rowan.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those high expectations at that level just creates better results all the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I think the takeaway for me was that's not easy. It's not easy to create this. It requires a diligent focus. It's our catchphrase that we use a lot: gentle pressure, relentlessly applied, and focus on that word relentless.
Yeah.
And I give credit to the folks we worked with there in the company. There was a relentless commitment to excellence, a relentless commitment to consistency, and that's what it takes. It was really powerful. It's in the culture, but I felt that PrimaFit was a cut above much of what we saw.
Yeah, and a relentless desire to improve.
Absolutely.
It was amazing.
Yeah. So ultimately, the trip itself for me was mind-bending just because the vast change in culture. Jakarta is a fabulous city. So many great things: the restaurants, the hotels,
coffee.
Every breakfast, every meal, just fabulous. I think we all thinking we're that close to Bali, and we didn't make it to Bali. So that's definitely high on my list to get back over.
That's why I mentioned Rowan.
Yeah.
He lives there.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's, it's part of the world that we don't necessarily think of all that frequently, but I just must say I was profoundly impacted by the experience and just had a fantastic time. From a business side, I learned a lot, and then again, just personally, it was fantastic working with these folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't say enough. And we really appreciate everyone there. Brian, Patrick, Quendy, Mike, Ryan, Rowan. Thanks for showing us a great time. We saw some things that we have already talked about a dozen times since we've been back. We really have not stopped talking about Indonesia and how cool it was. So thanks for showing us such a great experience. And I know this was a little different episode of Mandatory Listening, but we felt that it was really important and we wanted to talk about it. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. That's it for this episode. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave a review on our iTunes channel. We'll see you next week.